I still remember the taste of the burnt office coffee on the day it happened. That bitter, metallic tinge that clung to the back of my throat as I stared down at the blue folder on my desk. No one ever handed you a blue folder unless it was your last day. In my 14 years at Marlowe Solutions, I'd seen enough of them slide across desks like quiet little death warrants to recognize one instantly, but it still caught me off guard. I'd come in that Monday morning with the same routine, coffee in hand, inbox full, my tie just slightly crooked from the rushed drive, and there it was, waiting for me like a spider in the center of a web. The guy who handed it to me wasn't even from HR. It was Scott. Scott fucking Delaney, the new VP of Operations with his Yale MBA, $600 loafers, and the charisma of a damp sponge. I trained Scott when he first came on as a junior analyst, back when he still had acne, and asked me how to format spreadsheets. Somewhere along the way, he got good at smiling up and punching down. Now he was wearing my job title like a tailored suit, shaking my hand like he didn't just gut me in front of my open Outlook window. "It's not personal," he said, eyes already flicking back toward his phone. "Just restructuring, efficiency metrics." That word again, efficiency, corporate code for you're too old, too expensive, or too inconvenient. I wasn't even 45 yet. I was steady, reliable, the kind of guy who knew the system inside out because I built half of it. But steady doesn't excite investors. Steady doesn't show up in a quarterly report. Steady is invisible until you pull it out and the whole damn thing starts to shake. He didn't know. That's the part that would later make me laugh until I cried. Scott had no idea. He didn't check the ledger. Didn't ask who still had access to the transition accounts. Didn't think twice about firing the guy who handled the quarterly stock transfers. Why would he? I wasn't flashy. I didn't brag. I just did my job, quietly, thoroughly, and with enough foresight to build a little backdoor into the system when I first coded the internal asset tracker. It wasn't malicious. Back then, it was more like an emergency exit, just in case. Never thought I'd need it. But life has a way of backing you into corners. You spend over a decade giving a place your best, missing birthdays, working weekends, answering emails at midnight, thinking it buys you some kind of loyalty. Turns out all it buys is a nicer bonus for your boss when he cuts you loose a week before your stock options fully mature. 7 days. That's what I was missing. 7 days. And I would have walked away with a little over $412,000 in fully vested restricted shares. Instead, I was getting a cardboard box and a security escort. What Scott didn't know was that I had already transferred those shares, legally, into my wife's name 2 weeks prior. I hadn't even told my wife about the transfer at first. I didn't want to get her hopes up. But after our CFO, Ben Harlan, stepped down last quarter, and they passed me over for the interim role. Again, I started making plans. Quiet ones, careful ones. I read every line of the employee stock ownership policy like it was scripture. There was a clause, buried deep in the appendices, that allowed stock to be transferred to immediate family in cases of estate planning, provided it was reported to HR and filed through the appropriate internal forms. I had filled out those forms, slipped them in with the pile of quarterly compliance paperwork like a needle in a haystack. HR signed it off. No one questioned it. Most didn't even read past the first page. It had taken years to accumulate those shares. Performance grants, profit-sharing bonuses, little scraps handed out like gold stars to keep the middle managers dreaming. I always held on to mine. Some of the younger guys sold theirs the second they vested. New cars, down payments, crypto schemes. Not me. I kept everything. Let it compound like moss in the dark. I never planned to leave Marlowe. I thought I'd retire there. So when I transferred the shares to Kelly's name, it wasn't a heist. It was insurance. For the family. For all the late nights she spent alone while I sat under LED lights, crunching numbers for people who didn't know my kids' names. So when Scott called me into that small, sterile conference room and slid the termination papers across the table, I didn't flinch. I looked him straight in the eye and thanked him. He blinked, once, then twice, probably wondering if I'd finally cracked. Maybe I had. There's a certain freedom in having nothing left to lose. He told me I had until 2 p.m. to collect my things, said it would revoke my credentials before the end of the day, and someone from HR would call me about COBRA and unemployment options. I nodded, smiled even. Then I went back to my desk and sent a single email from my personal Gmail account. To Kelly, initiate the plan. Let's talk tonight. She responded within 2 minutes. Just a thumbs-up emoji. God, I love that woman. I packed slowly. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me rush. I'd seen others do it, scrambling to stuff years of their life into a company-issued box, while security hovered like vultures. I left the plaques, the team photos, even the mug I got for 10 years of service. Let Scott keep it all. The only thing I took with me was my nameplate and a worn, spiral-bound notebook full of old passwords and system notes. It wasn't technically against policy, but I knew if they'd bothered to look closely, they'd have tried to stop me. That notebook was a skeleton key. By 1:58, I was out the front door. No one said goodbye. No one made eye contact. That's the thing about corporate culture. Everyone's afraid they'll catch the disease, that somehow talking to the guy who just got axed makes them next in line. I didn't blame them. I just walked into the California sun, loosened my tie, and didn't look back. We didn't talk much that evening. Kelly and I. We didn't need to. After the kids were asleep and the dishwasher hummed in the background, we sat at the kitchen table with a bottle of Cabernet and a shared silence that said more than any outburst ever could. She slid her laptop over to me and turned the screen so I could see. The brokerage dashboard lit up in soft blues and greens. Our shares, her shares now, were there, right where I'd left them. No holds, no pending reviews, clean. I'd done everything by the book. Marlowe could fire me, but they couldn't claw back what no longer belonged to me. I stared at those numbers like they were breathing. $412,000, before taxes, of course. But still, it was enough to buy time. Time to figure out what came next. Time to breathe, to think, to plan. Kelly reached across the table and took my hand. So, she said, her voice light but measured. What now? I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to let it go, to just vanish from their radar and disappear into some quieter life. Take the money, downsize, maybe open that little wine and coffee bar we always talked about near the coast. But another part of me, the part they woke up when they kicked me to the curb like trash, wasn't ready to walk away. Not without making damn sure they felt what they'd done. Not out of spite. Not even revenge, exactly. Just justice. Maybe that's what people like Scott never understood. Some of us still believed in fairness, in balance, in making sure the house didn't always win. The next morning, I called an old colleague, Mark Tisdale. We came up through the analyst ranks together before he jumped ship to join a startup that eventually got swallowed up by one of the Big Four. He now worked as a consultant for private equity firms, evaluating mid-size companies for acquisition. When he picked up, I didn't waste time. I want to talk about Marlowe, I said. There was a pause, then a laugh. About time, he said. Turns out I wasn't the only one with a grudge. Over the past 2 years, Marlowe's board had quietly shifted direction, focusing on short-term gains and investor optics instead of long-term stability. They were propping up numbers by slashing R&D, laying off experienced employees, and outsourcing essential services to third-party vendors with barely vetted security protocols. It looked good on paper, but it was hollow. Mark had already flagged the company as structurally vulnerable. All it needed was a little nudge, and the whole stack would wobble. I had the data. Years of it. Forecasts, balance sheets, internal emails, even predictive models I'd built myself. Models they were still using, by the way. I kept everything, archived on a private drive, encrypted and backed up in 3 places. I wasn't going to leak it. I wasn't interested in some bombshell whistleblower moment. That wasn't the move. No, I wanted something quieter, slower, more surgical. "Help me find a buyer," I told Mark. "One who'll peel them apart piece by piece." He didn't even hesitate. "Let's get to work." Mark moved fast. Within a week, he'd looped in 2 private equity groups and a boutique M&A advisory firm out of Chicago that specialized in underperforming but asset-rich companies, code for bloated firms that looked good from the outside but were rotting quietly underneath. Marlowe checked every box. They still had brand equity, a few long-term government contracts, and proprietary logistics software. I helped architect back when the company gave a damn about innovation. But the moment you looked at their balance between cash flow and infrastructure debt, the rot started to show. I didn't work from a place of rage. I was too tired for that. This wasn't about getting even anymore. This was about bringing the truth to the surface. They wanted to fire people like me and call it optimization? Fine. Let the market show them what short-term thinking really costs. I packaged the intel carefully, data dumps scrubbed of anything remotely personal or illegal, just hard facts and forecasts. Mark helped translate it into glossy, sanitized presentations that made my stomach turn but caught investor interest. In a way, I was doing their job better than they ever did. Meanwhile, I watched from the outside as Marlowe kept chugging along, oblivious. They announced 2 new executive hires in marketing and strategy, both with vague titles and LinkedIn profiles full of buzzwords. I recognized the pattern. When a company starts stacking upper management while quietly shedding staff, they're either positioning for sale or collapse. Scott, still acting like king of the hill, posted some hollow nonsense on LinkedIn about shaping the future of enterprise logistics. The man loved the sound of his own nonsense. Then something happened I didn't expect. One of my old analysts, Priya, reached out. She'd just been laid off. Budget cuts, no warning. She had just bought a condo. Her voice cracked as she told me over the phone. That hit hard. Priya was sharp, loyal. She once stayed in the office until 3 a.m., helping me clean up a forecasting model that had gone sideways mid-quarter. Scott had no idea what she was worth. And now she was jobless, scared, and adrift because he needed to bump his EBIT by 0.5%. I offered to help, of course, got her in touch with Mark. But that conversation lit a fuse I didn't know was still there. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone like me. People who gave their best years to a company that would replace them faster than it replaced the toner in the printer. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't want to just walk away with my nest egg intact. I wanted to ensure that Scott Delaney's name would be forever tied to a failure case study in some business ethics textbook. Mark called me the next day. "You're not going to believe who bit," he said. "Who?" "Halberd Capital." I nearly dropped my phone. Halberd was the shark of the PE world. They didn't just buy companies. They gutted them, salvaged the organs, and left the rest for dead. The fact that they saw Marlowe as ripe enough to eat meant one thing. My work had struck home. Halberd Capital moved like predators in a glassy lake, smooth on the surface, all muscle underneath. Once they were interested, it was only a matter of time. Mark coached me through it, even looped me in quietly with one of their due diligence analysts under the guise of technical sourcing. I played my part well, just a quiet ex-employee with institutional memory, no axe to grind, just answering questions. I gave them breadcrumbs. I gave them a map. They followed the trail and found exactly what I knew they would: a company held together by duct tape and delusion. Within a month, rumors started swirling inside Marlowe. There were murmurs of a strategic review and external interest. The internal newsletter switched tone from rah-rah culture pieces to generic updates on positioning for long-term success. I could read the signs like tea leaves. It was happening. I checked in with Kelly every day, and every day she reminded me to breathe. "Don't get ahead of it," she'd say. "Let the trap close on its own." And so I waited. Then, 3 weeks later, the news broke. Halberd Capital had submitted a formal acquisition offer, structured as a leveraged buyout, all cash, pending board approval. The press release was filled with hopeful phrases about synergy and growth, but anyone who knew Halberd's reputation understood exactly what it meant. Heads were going to roll. Entire departments would be split, sold, or outsourced. They didn't buy companies to build them. They bought them to strip them clean and resell the bones. The board, of course, accepted. Marlowe's share price jumped 9% in a day. On the surface, it looked like a win. Scott even posted a victory lap on LinkedIn, tagging the CEO and thanking the team for a transformative journey. I took a screenshot. Sometimes the artifacts matter. Sometimes you want to remember the exact moment someone smiled just before the floor gave out. I knew what would come next. Halberd didn't waste time. They flew in transition teams within 72 hours, began restructuring within 2 weeks. The pink slips arrived in stacks. Scott was let go in the second wave, which surprised me. I thought he'd hold on longer, but apparently, Halberd found his role redundant. The irony hit me in waves. He'd used that exact word with me. Redundant. Now it was his name on the blue folder. Word of his departure hit my inbox through an old colleague. Apparently, Scott didn't take it well. Stormed out of the office, threw a paperweight, and told the HR rep to go to hell. I imagined him in the parking lot, stunned, staring at his car like it had betrayed him. I wondered if he'd ever realize who started the fire that burned his little empire down. Probably not. Men like Scott rarely see the blade until it's in their back, and even then they blame the knife. Meanwhile, Kelly and I made plans. We weren't going to sit on the money. We started looking at small towns up north, quiet places, good schools, clean air. I even started sketching out the business plan for that wine and coffee bar. It didn't feel like running away. It felt like walking toward something. A month after the sale went through, I drove past the old Marlowe campus one last time. It looked the same. Glass facade glinting in the sun, well-manicured hedges lining the walkway. But it felt different. Like a museum of something that no longer mattered. The parking lot was half empty. The receptionist desk inside the lobby was unmanned. A small notice taped to the glass doors read, "Please use south entrance during transition period." I didn't go in. I didn't need to. I'd already taken everything worth keeping. Closure didn't come in some dramatic moment. There was no confrontation, no email from Scott, no apology from the board. It came quietly. In the mornings when I got to sleep in past 6. In the afternoons when I picked up my daughter from school and she ran to hug me, surprised to see me there. In the evenings when Kelly and I walked through neighborhood streets, wine glasses in hand, talking about nothing and everything. The stress lines in my face started to fade. My phone stopped buzzing. For the first time in years, I was still. I ended up helping Priya and 2 other former Marlowe analysts launch a small consulting firm, lean, focused, and built on actual value. Not buzzwords and ladder climbing. We landed 2 clients within the first 6 months. Nothing flashy, but honest work. And every invoice paid felt like a middle finger to the system that tossed us aside. We made a rule. No VPs, no empty titles. No one got paid for just talking. We wore a lot of hats and no one complained. It felt real. As for the wine and coffee bar, it's real now, too. We opened the Ledger and Vine 6 weeks ago on a tree-lined street in Sonoma. It's small, just 12 tables and a little patio, but it's ours. Kelly runs the wine tastings. I handle the books and roast the beans myself. There's a kind of magic in watching someone sip something you made and close their eyes like the world just slowed down. We get locals, weekenders, even a couple of former Marlowe folks who found their way north and want to start fresh. One night, just before closing, a man in a wrinkled button-down wandered in, ordered a Malbec, and sat quietly in the corner. I recognized him after a few glances. It was one of the board members, Harold Levine. He didn't recognize me. Why would he? I was background to him. Furniture. I poured his wine, gave him a smile, and let him sit. He paid in cash and left a generous tip. As he walked out, he paused, looked around the shop like he was seeing something he didn't quite understand, then nodded to himself. I never said a word. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's not dramatic. Sometimes it's simply living better, with dignity, with peace, with the knowledge that when the house tried to burn you down, you walked away carrying the match, and you lit your own fire somewhere new.